Dear Monpa Mega, well, you're out there stomping your feet and pounding your chest about Trump's slew of indictments being election interference. Let's have a look at the facts, shall we? Cyrus Vance, New York DA at the time, began issuing subpoenas in the hush money payment case in August of 2019. Fani Willis launched her investigation into Trump in 2021. The United States House Select Committee on the January 6th attack opened their investigation in July of 2021. Letitia James filed her fraud charges into the Trump org in September of 2022. The National Archives first asked Trump to return the classified documents he took in May of 2021. He only returned some, not all. So in March of 2022, the FBI opened an investigation. That August, they searched Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump announced his candidacy on November 15th, 2022. So it seems a lot less like he's being indicted in the middle of his campaign and a lot more like he's campaigning in the middle of his indictments. And I know that facts are about as useful to you as a dictionary and a cousinless dating pool, but that doesn't make them any less true. My guest today is Reed Galen. Reed is an independent political strategist and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He's a veteran of public affairs and the political profession with more than 20 years of experience. Reed has become one of the most prominent political voices in American politics, particularly as it relates to stopping anti-democratic candidates from gaining control over our government. We talk about what has become of the Republican Party, why Donald Trump still has a hold on them, and about just how extreme the GOP has become in recent years. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Are You Effing Kidding Me? Reed Galen.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. This is so exciting. I've always wanted to talk to you, so I'm really excited about this. Yeah, well, let's just get right into it. Some memos about debate, prep for Mr. DeSantis have leaked, and you had an Instagram story about it. So let's talk about it. First of all, I have two questions. It's two parts.
Sure.
I ask everybody this. What the hell is wrong with Ron DeSantis as an overview? And what is up with this strategy of defending Trump?
Well, let's start. The first answer is easy. Everything is wrong with him as a candidate, near as I can tell, as a person, as a politician, certainly as the chief executive of the state of Florida. This is a guy who has gone out of his way to be as bad a person as he can be across the board. The second piece is, it's not unusual there. So there are federal laws, right, that a federal campaign, so a presidential campaign, cannot coordinate with its super PAC. It can't talk to them, right? Because campaigns have a certain amount of money they can raise under certain limits. Super PACs can raise as much money as they want from whoever, right? So there are these rules. But what the super PAC does is it will often telegraph, it will put out, if they ran a poll that was really good for the candidate they're supporting, they'll put it out to the public and say, by the way, here's what we learned, right? Now they're giving it to everybody else, but what they're really telling is their candidate, hey, this is what you should do. So in the case of Ron DeSantis, there's a guy named Jeff Rowe who runs, I don't even remember what the name of the super PAC is, it doesn't matter, who put all this stuff on his company's website, ideally for the DeSantis campaign to pick up. Thousands and hundreds, I guess, of pages of memos and everything. But the top piece, the one, Joe, that's made all the news is about his, their suggested debate strategy. Attack Vivek Ramaswamy, attack Joe Biden in the media 3 to 5 times, defend Donald Trump when Chris Christie attacks him. And here's the thing is, if you're going to give advice, even indirectly, it should be good advice. And this is horrible advice. It's horrible advice because by the very nature of its leak, right, it now shows that the super PAC thinks that Vivek Ramaswamy is a threat to Ron DeSantis, which in the political ether, Joe, means that everybody thinks, wow, Ron DeSantis is afraid of this guy? He's 37 years old. He's never been a politician. He has no this. Is he interesting? I guess mildly interesting because he's not any of these other idiots, right? So but it also puts DeSantis and his campaign in a position, which is if they go ahead and do these things, right, they've already been ridiculed for it. So now they have to come up with something else to do. So now if they don't attack Vivek, right, Vivek's going to say, well, I guess he decided he was afraid of me, right? So this is why I said I was on Stephanie Ruhl's show last night on MSNBC. Like, the only reason I can feel like that Jeff Rowe did this is because he doesn't like Ron DeSantis. Like, he actually wants him to get out of the race. Because why would you give advice like this anyway, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, attacking Biden, okay, fine. And attacking the media, fine, right? But the idea of defending Donald Trump when like, if you want to be the Republican nominee, how does defending Donald Trump get you there, right? And this is the one thing that not only DeSantis, but any of the rest of them, with the exception of probably Asa Hutchinson, who's not going to be there next week, and Chris Christie, who's really, this is on a reputation repair tour. You're from the Garden State, you know, is like, if you're not going to take on the person who's most likely to be the nominee, then you're never going to be the nominee. And so, again, this was bad advice, badly delivered, and now it's put DeSantis in a place where he will be ridiculed between now and when they take the debate stage next week.
Yeah, it's a lose-lose for him, but it's just sort of like part and parcel to everything that has been his campaign. I mean, it's a train wreck. And this idea to run to the right of Donald Trump without criticizing Donald Trump, while Donald Trump and his entire orbit are going after you. I mean, it boggles the mind. It just seems like the, antithesis of good political calculation. I just don't understand. I've never understood it.
Well, the one thing you have to understand, and is, Rick Wilson, who I think you've also spoken to, may have alluded to, is that if you're going to go after Trump, you have to go after him all the time, every day, relentlessly, without fear, right? Of what he's going to say about you, what he's going to have what he's going to tell his people to do to you. This is something they all should have done when they decided to get in against Donald Trump. And they all decided, for whatever reason, that, somehow, the magical Big Mac fairy is going to take Donald Trump away and suddenly open, the floodgates will open and the Republican Party will return and we'll have blah, 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 right? All the magical thinking. Mm-hmm. But for DeSantis, this is the weird thing too, Joe, is that when you talk about running to the right of Trump, like, they're not even on like a normal left-right spectrum anymore. They're like, if the left-right spectrum is here, where you could say there is a progressive and or liberal governing philosophy, and there's a conservative or right-wing governing philosophy, like, they're on Mars. They're way out there, right? Because this stuff is so antithetical to what we've seen as Americans for 200 almost 50 years, and what we think of right now. That being said, in southern states and all that, this is far more real and has been for generations. But DeSantis, it's like going after African-American education in Florida, right? Going after the LGBT community. Like, the thing about these is that these are not, this is not traditional, right? In 2015, gay marriage was legalized. Okay. Since then, right, gay marriage has become part and parcel of American social life. It is a socially accepted institution in this country. It is by most Americans, a morally accepted institution in this country, right? So therefore, the idea of being part of the LGBT community is also broadly socially accepted. So what you're seeing is that DeSantis is taking, like, he's not conservative, he's white nationalist, white Christian nationalist, right? Okay. And what he will do, even though he won't be the nominee, is that Trump is always first and foremost worried about his base. That's all he really cares about, because he knows those are his people. They'll ride or die with him. Right. So what it will have the effect of DeSantis is taking all these positions, and you saw after DeSantis released that just risible a video about Trump being supportive of the gay community, right? Yeah. Trump now started to move towards that position, right? On the African American stuff, Trump will go to that. He'll go to where ultra MAGA and Trump, they go back and forth, which is one of them's always ahead, but it's usually ultra MAGA, and Trump will always move to catch up with him, because he is right in the idea that he can't win without them. But the more he moves with them, the more people like you, frankly, right? Moms, suburbanites want nothing to do with that because it's so foreign to any idea of how they see the world operating.
Yeah, and you said it's not just Trump that is moving along with Ultra MAGA. You said it's essentially what DeSantis is doing is he does have the gravity. He's moving the entire party, really. You said into the darkness, which is what you were just talking about. And that I feel like that's definitely true, in particular with Trump. I mean, you saw him all of a sudden releasing one of those tan mom videos where he looks like all backlit and it's weird. And he's talking about, instead of talking about school choice, which is what he largely talked about in the 4 years he was in office, he's now talking more about this culture war stuff, this like patriotic curriculum and the woke stuff that DeSantis really sort of brought to the forefront and is leading in a way the charge on. And Trump is definitely catching up. The whole party, you said. And I'm curious about that. So they're all really following DeSantis's lead in this way. And then I guess my bigger question is, why is that effective for not just the base, but the party? Is it effective for the whole party? Because I know it'll alienate moms like me, but there's still moms in the suburbs who will vote against their own best interests. And I don't understand that either. But yeah, why is this effective? Is it effective?
Again, this is a great question. And this is the difference between being in the thrall of a movement like they are and electoral success. Trump had electoral success in 2016, just barely. He hasn't had any since then, right? Which is why you saw that there was such an uproar amongst the party late last year after the 2022 midterms, because they blamed Trump for costing them gubernatorial races, House seats, Senate seats. But I think it's important as a distinction, Joe, to say this is they weren't mad at him for all the things he said and done, right? They weren't mad at him for January 6th or having dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West. They were mad because he cost them power. That's what upsets them. Not the things he espouses, not the things that he supports, right? The fact that he costs them power. And so what you're seeing now is this in the best interests of the country? No. Is it in the best interests of American parents and school children? No, but here's the other part too, is they fundamentally dislike public education.
Yeah.
I have no way of quantifying this right now, Joe, but I will find a way to do it. They want stupid people.
Yep.
They need stupid people. They don't want smart people. It's just like I interviewed a guy named John Ward, who writes for Yahoo News. He grew up in the evangelical movement. And within the evangelical movement, there is a strong, feeling that the only knowledge you get comes from the Bible, right? And from the church and from the community that is very tight knit. And I think you see a lot of those similar things, which is they don't want you to be open-minded. They don't want you. They say they quote unquote do their own research. That means they go to Alex Jones or whatever, right? It's not. It's they're looking for things that reinforce their belief systems that might not challenge them, right? And so what you're seeing is they don't want people who are smart enough to challenge them. But if we have to have school, Joe, right, then it's going to be prayer in schools. It's going to be, slavery was effective for, or was a great way to learn blacksmithing. But I mean, here's the thing, for the 400 years of slavery, right, or 400 plus years of slavery, right? Like, so let's say you learned how to be a blacksmith on a plantation. You were born on that plantation. You learned how to be a blacksmith and you died on that plantation. Like, it wasn't like, hey, you know what? I'm done working today and I'm going to go home and make myself a frying pan, right? Like, it's so ridiculous. And then you go down to a place like Texas where they want to expand, school vouchers and all this other stuff for private schools. But here's the thing. There are millions of school children, right? Millions and millions and millions of school children in Texas or Florida or around the country. Like, there aren't nearly enough private schools to ever do this, right? So it's all just posturing to ultimately knock down public education. Again, you'll never convince me that they're not just trying to create a stupider country that they believe they can control.
Well, absolutely. And there's so many layers to the push towards the privatization of, education and this dismantlement of public education and pushing them towards charter schools and disguising it as school choice. And all the statistics show, despite whatever they say, that it's actually detrimental to essentially all but 1%, that top 1% of the kids. But in these charter schools, there's no oversight, so they can do whatever they want. Curriculum can be religious based. It doesn't matter. And now in some, I think it was Nevada, they're using state funding to pay for a religious charter school. But there's so many layers there about keeping Americans stupid, because one of the big layers for me anyway is keeping us stupid, keeping us poor, and keeping women pregnant, right? So all of these things that saddle people down, so they don't have time to be curious about what's happening or isn't happening, to be curious about, is this person I put in office actually doing anything? Do they have any policies? They won't have the time, they won't have the bandwidth, and as far as intelligence goes, and they'll be straddled with all these kids they can't afford, that their wives or girlfriends had to have. And it's all, because the Republican Party isn't a party of policy or platform anymore, it's really all designed to be like, to come back to those people and say, I know things are hard for you, but I am the only one who can help you, even though I'm not actually helping you, which is, again, they're all voting against their own self-interest right now. And I talk a lot about that. But it is interesting, this whole attack on.
Look, I mean, Fox News, OAN, Trump himself, all of this is the 21st century American equivalent of lions eating Christians in Rome, right? It's all distraction, right? Yeah. Don't have enough food, throw another circus. Don't have enough to do, don't have a job, throw another parade, right? And that's basically all this stuff is. But the difference is, most of the people who really buy into this stuff are not economically disadvantaged, right? They're not the ones who like can't put food on the table. And so, there is a vast reservoir of resentment against a world that is changing and has changed and changed forever. Like, the world doesn't stay the same. It spins around the sun in 365 days, right? Like, every time, and for the last 6 billion years, and for the next 4 billion years till the sun explodes or whatever the hell it is, right? But history doesn't stop.
Keith Richards dies, yeah.
Right, Keith will, which is likely to happen after the sun explodes. But the point is like, here's the other part too. They want to keep everybody in this rapture, but they also are selling a nostalgia that never existed. Right, the things that they talk about, Leave It to Beaver, or all these things of the 1950s, like. The 50s were actually a very dynamic decade that saw a lot of massive change within the United States, both economically, culturally, politically, elsewhere, and otherwise. And that's what they're selling, but it never existed in the first place. And for the people that lived it, right, yeah, it was the explosion of the middle class. But instead of trying to figure out, as you said about Republicans, trying to figure out how to create an economic boom amongst the middle class, instead of trying to figure out how to bring those people who are at or below the poverty line up to some level above subsistence, and frankly bring into line the plutocracy that is, has flourished in the last 30 years, right? They're like, you don't like those people. Those people are coming to take your jobs. Those people are coming to rape your wife. Those people are coming to ransack your house. And who are those people? Minorities, women, LGBT, anybody who's an other, right? The other is bad.
Right. And I always think of them as sort of in the throes of their own extinction, because the electorate is changing as it does, as you said, as the world does. And they are so resistant to that change that they would prefer instead to try to stifle it, to suppress it, to like defeat the will of the people. And that isn't really something Americans are necessarily known for being especially tolerant of, but it does work for that segment of the population, like you said. And I've seen this in my own family, who before Trump wouldn't say this stuff out loud. They wouldn't say the stuff about their kids going to colleges and being indoctrinated with leftist woke ideology. They wouldn't say that they thought that, the Latinos are coming for their jobs they wouldn't ever, by the way, take. They would never have said any of that out loud until Donald Trump, but it was always there. But he sort of pulled the veil back on that. And it's very powerful for that segment of the population, but like, to what end? It's obviously like going up against a tsunami of the will of the American people. And it's eventually going to have to peter out, right? Or what are we looking at? Like literal authoritarianism?
Well, if Trump wins again, yeah, I would say that. And look, I would say this is that Trump will likely be the Republican nominee. Anybody who says he's going to go to jail or be prevented from running, maybe, but I'm not counting on it. The only way to beat this guy, the only way to make this guy go away, right? I mean, politically, is to trounce him next year, to absolutely beat him like a drum, such that anybody who might have thought about acting badly is like, am I really going to do this? Right? Am I really going to, especially because we see whether or not it's in DC and Georgia and Florida, wherever, like you're going to start to see people flip, because just like for a mob boss, nobody wants to go up the river for 25 or 30 years for some other guy. Right. But what I would say is this, is that if he is the nominee, right, a major party nominee in this country has a 50-50 shot of being president. So we shouldn't take anything for granted. They're losing, the Republicans are losing the culture war, or they've lost the culture war. You're right. They don't have any ideas. The economy, I just saw something this morning, 55% of the American people say the economy is bad or poor, right? But 61% of Americans say their economy is great. Okay. Well, that's like, I hate Congress, but I love my congressman, right? Like it's just, oh, I'm so afraid of crime. Is there crime in your neighborhood? Oh, well, no, I live in a very safe neighborhood, right? Mm. So it's like, it's always like the perception of what goes on outside your house versus the perception of how you feel inside of it. So I would say that if Trump gets elected, then yes, we are off the map, right? Like all of the things that he didn't know how to do, right? And not in the context of being president, but in the context of consolidating power, yep, he will do. And I think it's either Tim Snyder from Yale or Ruth Ben-Ghiat says, listen to what they say. These people tell you what they want to do. And that's why, Joe, like, we don't have to make up the stuff they say. We don't have to like find ways to twist statistics. Like they say it out loud. Look at the speech that Trump gave in Waco, Texas on the 30th anniversary of the Branch Davidian standoff. Like that told you everything you need to know. This is the final battle. This is a war of retribution. Mm-hmm. He believes that, and his people believe that. And this is the last thing about the world changing is, for them, it is an existential fight. They see their way of life ending. They see it as an extinction level event. And we should not underestimate their willingness to stave that off as long as they can through political and non-political methods.
Which, I mean, according to some of the polls, the one that came out yesterday is political suicide for them. He's like a cinder block tied to their ankle and he's bringing them down. But like you said, if he is the nominee, there's still a 50% chance that he could win. But this, I asked everyone I talked to, because I end up talking to a lot of former Republicans. Because I cannot wrap my brain around it. And Rick tried to explain it and George tried to explain it. And I still don't understand it, because you talked about off ramps. And January 6th was obviously an off-ramp, should have been an off-ramp, was for a hot second an off-ramp for Lindsey on out, I'm done. And then he went to the airport and some people booed him and he cried. How the hell is 4 indictments and 91 charges not an off-ramp when they know that this cinder block that is Trump is tied to their ankles? What is going on with like these establishment Republicans? That there's got to be more of them, honestly. There has to be more of them who aren't in love with Donald Trump than this MAGA rabid wing of the party. It has to be.
Well, I think you're right. I think there's a few things, though, is that one, it's all based on fear. A lot of it is based on fear. They fear Trump. They fear his people. They fear the mean tweet, right? They fear the trolls. Some of them might fear violence, right? Yeah. I mean, think about, Adam Kinzinger, right? Yeah. Like, his wife was threatened, his children were threatened. And so, there are, we heard about, Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, right? He was threatened. His daughter-in-law, the widow of his son has been threatened, all these things. So these are real things. We shouldn't underestimate those, but those are the people who are his, sworn opponents. The people who are inside the movement, right? They see it as a couple of things. One is, okay, yeah, Trump's ugly. He's a bore. I don't like all this stuff. But the truth is like none of them have faced any sanction for it. Right. The Republicans retook the House last year, right? Should they have taken it by more? They should have in a normal year, but they're bad at politics. And again, yeah, Trump is an absolute albatross. But they haven't faced any sanction. But I think here's the other part too, is that the poison has seeped all the way down through this party apparatus, right? if you look at, the state party of Texas or the state party of Florida, like, are they totally MAGA? They are. That doesn't surprise you. But, the state parties of California and Massachusetts, they're just as nuts, right? The people who are waiting in the wings to run for local, county, statewide office, like, they're nuts. They're not, oh, you know what? Yeah, I need to go back to being Mitt Romney. Like, that's not, they see Mitt Romney as a rhino. They see Mitch McConnell as a rhino. So, and the establishment is, for lack of a better way to put it, is basically dead, right? Yeah. It doesn't exist. It's a spent political force. It had its time. It didn't pay attention. I certainly didn't pay attention to the MAGA wing, to the Tea Partiers, to the social conservatives. Here's the biggest mistake our arrogance, led us to. We thought those people were in there with us. They didn't have anywhere else to go. The mistake we made, Joe, is that we were in there with them. There were way more of them than there were of us, and we didn't have any place else to go. They let us be in charge until they decided not to. And here's where, if luck is where preparation meets opportunity, then Trump was the luckiest thing that could have happened to this decades-long conservative movement, to the white nationalist zombies that were waiting in the wings, right, that Trump brought, out of the shadows. Without him, they are still in the woods, literally and figuratively. He gave them something to latch onto, and they have made the most of it. And so, yeah, is Trump the alpha and the omega? No, not necessarily. But he is the leader of a movement. And to give you a very long answer to a very short question, why do they do it? One, because of fear, and two, because they understand that the base, which might only be 35-40% of the party writ large, but makes up about 70% of the primary electorate, it's a religious experience for them. Anything you do to him, right, from the Justice Department, it's the deep state, right? His moral failings, right? Everybody else does it too. And this is a really important point. Why is it the Biden crime family? Because Joe Biden must be as bad as Donald Trump. There must be the false equivalency. See, because, well, Trump is bad, but everybody's that bad. Russia's bad, but America's just as bad as Trump. Everybody has to be so valueless, so bad, that it really doesn't matter. And that's what they're ultimately, I think, politically trying to get to, which is, it doesn't really matter who I vote for, right? If I vote for Biden, he's a communist, he's a crook. If I vote for Trump, he's a crook, but at least I've known him as a crook. He's not a communist. Or maybe I just don't participate at all. And apathy will ultimately be our undoing.
Yeah, so many follow-ups to that. Going to try and keep it quick, but this idea that you said that Trump essentially showed up at the luckiest time for Trump, because that was sort of still, that was the undercurrent in the party. They just didn't have like a shiny, yam-dyed guy to hide behind,
right.
And sort of forged through like a bull through everything, which is, I always thought of him as sort of being this thing that they hid behind, because they were doing the dirty work behind him with all the big words and the stupid things that got us all outraged. And it's interesting because I foolishly thought a lot of things. I obviously foolishly thought Hillary was going to win. I foolishly thought
so did everybody else, including Donald Trump.
Right. I foolishly thought that January 6th was going to be an off-ramp. I foolishly thought that there would be an after Trump for the Republican Party. I foolishly thought, oh, he's done. He lost. He's out. They have a loser. He's been impeached twice. He lost. Instead, and I am always willing to admit what I don't know. That is the truth. I am stubborn and pig-headed, but I will always admit what I don't know, what I get wrong. And I got that one wrong, because the Republican Party in the times since Trump has only gone further than Trump. Like you said, when he was in the White House, I don't think he fully understood. Like, he was exploring all those little cracks and fissures, but I don't think he fully understood that he could inhabit them. Like Miles Taylor told me, in particular related to the VA, that he hated the VA. He hated all the money that goes to the VA. He wanted to take that money and use it for other things. And he was told, you can't do that. Well, for a million reasons, but until they told him it didn't help him politically in his reelection, was he willing to say, okay, I won't do that, but he will do it if given another 4. But the party in the meantime, just look at Texas, look at Abbott, look at DeSantis. Like, Trump wanted to bus migrants to sanctuary cities and didn't, because they told him it wouldn't be politically good for him. But Abbott did it. DeSantis did it. I mean, the party's actually gotten much worse. And I really didn't see that coming, but that is very foolish on my part. But they didn't really get worse. They were just, the veil had been pulled back, Trump paved the way, and they were finally filling the space that they always wanted to fill, essentially, right?
Yeah. Stuart Stevens, another senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, said Trump didn't invent the Republican Party, he revealed it. And as someone who literally grew up in the party, Joe, right? I mean, lived in Washington, D.C. my entire childhood, went to Capitol Hill with my dad, was a page in the U.S. House when I was in high school, you know, and then went to work for George W. Bush when he was governor of Texas, and then when he was president of the United States, right? I didn't see it. And now have to remember that in the old days, you could be a conservative or you could be a Republican or you could be a conservative Republican, right? They didn't necessarily go together. And I was a Republican. I've never been a conservative, right? I'm probably too free thinking. I'm too, you know, I don't want to say libertarian, but like, you live your life the way you want to live your life. I'm going to live the way, you know, mine. And if they come in contact with each other, let's be respectful, right? Seems to make sense. That's not where we are now. And I would say this too, is that what you've seen is Trump gave, and I'm not sure if I can use this word, if you have to bleep it, is like Trump gave everybody license to be their asshole self, right? So let me just give you this example. So I was in Southern California years ago, probably 3-4 years ago now. Trump was still in office. And there's this Range Rover, right? And whatever, it's top of the line Range Rover. And it's blacked out, right? It's painted black. It's got blacked out windows. It's got blacked out tires and rims and everything else. And there's a "Don't Tread on Me" sticker on the bumper, right? And I'm thinking to myself, this is a guy who's driving a $150,000 car. He's never been tread on in his life, right? But Trump has told him, you are. If you don't get to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, however you want to do it, regardless of however anybody feels about it, your freedom, my freedom, is being infringed, right? Even though that guy, even to this day, is probably the freest human being that's ever lived on the planet, right?
Right.
No one can tell him what to do, right? Within the bounds of polite society. Why do we call it polite society, Joe? Because you didn't go out of your way to offend other people. Now they do it. They relish it. Yeah. Owning the libs is a pillar of the Republican Party, of the conservative movement. Trolling, right, is a platform, is a plank in the party platform, because they want to upset people, because upsetting people, right, makes them feel better about themselves, right? And so what do you see now is, why did so many people go along with it? Because it felt good. Right? Why do they watch Fox News? Because they primed these people for years with the resentment and the anger, and they just jab that adrenal gland. They just jab it and jab it and jab it. And what happens? Just like everything else, you become addicted to it. You become addicted to it, and then you need more and more and more of it. So now these people are strung out on right-wing propaganda. They can't help themselves. I mean, there was even a study years ago where it's like they asked people, they volunteered, like, can you stop watching Fox News and start watching CNN? And when I say these numbers, it's not going to sound like a lot, but it was like 3 or 4% of people go, wow, that shit is crazy that I was watching, right? Wow, I shouldn't watch that. Yeah. It's also upsetting that the other 97% were fine with it, right? But look at, you go to, I mean, you know, if you've got MAGA family or friends like I do, right? They're angry all the time about something. How could it be like this? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look at who you are. Look at where you're sitting. Why are you so angry? You know why? Because the vacuum that has been filled on the right-wing ecosystem is anger, vitriol, lies, propaganda. And so no wonder half the country's pissed off all the time.
Yeah, so pissed off that they're buying up cases of Bud Light to shoot it. And it's all built on this fictional premise too. They're also mad because all the shit that they're mad about isn't getting done by the people that they think are supposed to be getting shit done, but they don't know it because they're so distracted by fucking woke stoves. Sorry, I said fucking. I said it twice. Like, that's the thing. You said it about Rome, but I just wanted to touch real quick before we go to the last final round, which is my favorite round. We'll get to it 1 second. Like, there's this fictional thing you talked about, this idea that Trump is some alpha male. We see this friggin' alpha male stuff coming from the Andrew Tates and the Tucker Carlsons, and these are not alpha males. No. Donald Trump is not an alpha male, but the base is so willing to, I call him fictional Trump, this fictional version, this that he's fit, that he's a patriot, that he's devout, that he's a family man. He wanted to date his own daughter, a family man, and that he's an alpha male. Like, how do they not see what we can see with our eyes? Well, how do they not see it? Is it a cult? Is it really just a cult?
It's cultish in nature. And again, it goes back to this idea of this sphere, right? It's hugely important for the conservative movement, for MAGA, to keep everybody inside the bubble, right? Think about last summer when Fox said they weren't going to air the January 6th hearings, right? Because there wasn't anything to be learned there, and they were going to run Tucker live without commercials. Why did they run Tucker without commercials? Because the last thing they wanted to do was give anybody the opportunity to flip over and see what was going on, because maybe they wouldn't come back. Then they realized, oh no, millions of people are watching this anyway. We better make sure that we're televising it with our spin, right? That people had seen reality, and that as soon as reality comes, it's the same reason why you saw with this latest indictment in Georgia. You can always tell when MAGA is scared by the level of freak out. Yeah. Right. The more, everything is projection, Joe. Everything is projection. Right. So if they are losing their minds, you know they're worried, because reality is encroaching. And they can't have that, because once the bubble bursts, and there is actual, literature on this, that when these kinds of bubbles burst, it typically occurs when the leader, in this case Trump, exits the stage one way or the other. There is sort of a Rip Van Winkle moment for some part of the movement, which is sort of like, what was I doing? Yeah. What was I thinking? How was this a good idea? Now, there are other people who will say, yes, I've woken up. Wow, that was bad. And they still harbor stuff. But but movements like this don't last very long, because, as I like to say, the only people that these people hate more than you and me, Joe, are each other. Yeah, right? And themselves. They ultimately eat the movement eats itself. The problem is like a fission explosion, right? Where you're splitting the atom, it releases an enormous amount of negative energy and activity, and that's why Hitler lasts 12 years but destroys the world in the process, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's what we're going to have here, but that's what happens. Is the level of destructive force that occurs when these people take over is something that lasts not very long, because, again, none of them are very good at governing. None of them want to govern. They just want power. But the damage that they do in that short amount of time takes years, if not decades, to repair.
Yeah, I wrote about this very thing. I think this was the most triggering for them too. I wrote about it on my Substack, and I essentially, the way with Marjorie Taylor Greene, her freak out was especially acute. The way I thought of it was, she's like the gas. I think of him as a gasoline pourer on this bigoted fire, and she's thinking, we're going to lose our supply of gasoline, which is Donald Trump, and that how then what happens to us? And what happens to Marjorie Taylor Greene? God forbid she goes away. That would be terrible. Okay, well, thank you for all of that time. That's what I call the meat of my conversation. And I don't mean that euphemistically. Anyway, moving on. So this is what I call the rapid fire random question round. Reed, are you ready?
All right. I am ready.
And I'm going to go quickly, because I know I've taken a lot of your time. Okay, so these are completely random questions, just pulled out of my head, which is not a good place. But anyway, okay, question 1. Who is the last person on Earth you'd want to be stuck in an elevator with for 24 hours?
Oh,
they could be alive or dead. It doesn't matter, theoretically.
The guy who wrote the song Africa from Toto.
Really? Okay. I can't even hear the song in my head right now for some strange reason, but dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Okay, not the Cars for Kids guy though. That would be worse.
Oh God.
Yeah. Mine would be Ted Cruz. I imagine. Oh, I don't know.
Here's the thing about Ted Cruz is he's a big wuss. If you just told him to shut up and threatened to punch him in the face, he'd shut up.
And you're like, shut up, dollar store Wolverine. Go eat your boogers in the corner. Okay, question 2. Oh, this one's a really good one. Why do you love the band Cake so much?
I hate the band Cake. I hate them. I think it's the worst combination of stupid lyrics and bad bass lines. Every time I hear it, that it just, oh yeah, it just drives it. All right, I want to revise my answer. The band Cake. That's who I would rather. Yes. If I was stuck in an elevator for 24 hours with them, I would climb out and throw myself down the shaft.
So it wasn't, stick shifts and safety belts. That you don't love that song? Perhaps.
No,
Okay, well, I like that you revised your first answer and made it resonate with the second answer. No one's done that, so congratulations to you on that. If I had sound effects like Stephanie Miller, I would play like a clapping sound, but I don't. This is my setup. So, last question. Okay, this is a good one. What movie makes you laugh no matter how many times you've seen it?
Spies Like Us.
Oh, that's a good one.
Just a pillar of my Cold War childhood.
That's Dan Aykroyd, right?
And Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
I mean, just a brilliant, just ridiculous send up of spy movies. Just the best.
And it doesn't get made today. So many of these movies don't get made today. Like that's
listen. None of the movies that were made when I was a child. Anything by John Hughes doesn't get made.
No,
right? Nothing.
My favorite movie, The Jerk, doesn't get made. No way.
No
way.
No,
Definitely
The Jerk is no. He hates he's shooting at these cans.
Stay away from the cans. Die.
Right. Nathan Johnson. Yeah. Bring me some fresh wine. None of this old wine. But see, here's the other thing too about Gen X white guys. There's this thing about Gen X white guys. When you turn 45, you have to be into one of two things: World War II or smoked meats. Right? I've always been a World War II buff, but I think the third one is: could you have an entire conversation just in movie lines? And I think that most Gen X white guys could do that.
I don't know. I'm not a Gen X white guy, but I could have an entire jerk conversation in just jerk quotes. I know that. That sounds weird, but I could. I mean, I know the whole Thermos song by heart, and I don't mean jerk. For the people out there who think I have an OnlyFans, I don't mean jerk like that. So knock it off, okay?
Or not jerk chicken.
So a lot of Gen X guys like to jerk their meat, is what you're saying?
Well, it's very spicy.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So spicy jerked meat. Reed, what are you working on? Where do you want people to go? What do you have going on?
Sure. Listen, thank you first and foremost for having me. I would love it if people would tune into the Lincoln Project podcast. We drop 2 episodes a week, and writing stuff over at resolutesquare.com. And then, follow me on Twitter at Reed Galen, or on Threads at Reed_Galen_LP. You can find me on Instagram there too. But look, the fight continues day in and day out. The idea here is, let me get all my cliches out of the way. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. When you're exhausted, the answer is not to quit, but to rest. This is now a good time here. Late August is a good time to rest. But let me be clear about this: the general election has begun, right? And this is, as much as I hate to agree with Donald Trump, this is the fight for the ages, right? This is the chance. And the world has changed, Joe, but we shouldn't think of that as a bad thing. We should think of this as November of 2024 is our opportunity to decide how the next phase of America is going to look. The alternative is Donald Trump gets to decide, and I don't think anybody wants that.
No, and I will say that this fight that we are facing has made allies of people who I wouldn't have been allied with. I know that for a fact. I didn't have a lot of Republicans that I counted as friends prior to Donald Trump's emergence on the scene, prior to this movement away from democracy. But you are in the trenches. You and Rick and everybody else are in the trenches with Democrats like me fighting the same fight.
Listen, let me just say this is the thing about coalition, fighting as a coalition, and that's what we do as part of the pro-democracy movement, is you don't have to agree on everything. You just have to agree on one thing, right? And we all agree, right, that Joe Biden getting reelected is the thing that needs to happen, because his reelection, again, gives us the chance to do the things that we want to do to bend the arc of the arc of history towards justice. And the alternative is, again, that train heading into the tunnel. And none of us want that.
Hell no. Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you for all your work, obviously, and for, really taking up this fight, but just, I'm grateful for you. Thank you for joining me. And that does it for this episode of Are You Effing Kidding Me with JoJo from Jerz. And see you guys next Saturday. Look, I think we can all agree, if we can't agree on much else, that these are pretty crazy times, and navigating all of that every day can be pretty stressful. In my case, I had 2 middle schoolers, and there are just some days where I'm dragging myself across the finish line. And then there are the nights when a glass of wine or 2 fits the de-stress bill. But let's be honest, I'm a busy mom. I can't be waking up feeling like crap, whether that's that second glass of wine I had or eating my daughter's leftover chicken fingers because I didn't want them to go to waste. Either way, enter Z-Biotics. Here's how you use it. Step 1, have a Z-Biotics. For best results, make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow, wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic, your first drink of the night for a better tomorrow. Engineered by a team of PhD microbiologists, Z-Biotics is a probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol, which is what's responsible for those rough mornings after drinking. So go to zbiotics.com/politicalvoices or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Political Voices at checkout. Again, go to zbiotics.com/politicalvoices or scan the QR code on the screen right now.